Hi there. My name is Matthew. I'm a strategic systems consultant here at QuestSoftware. Today I'd like to talk about GPOADmin. First off, when we take a look at something like GPOADmin, the first question we need to answer is, why does this exist? What core job is this designed to do inside an organization? So first, before we get into all the various features that GPOADmin has, I'd like to take a step back and talk a little bit about group policy itself and why a product like GPOADmin is many times a great benefit to an organization. So GPOADmin at its core is a group policy governance solution. And by governance, we really mean, in this case, a kind of a constellation of features, such as versioning, check-in, check-out, detailed delegation, categorization. So why are those features necessary? Why is it important to have a solution like GPOADmin that overlays on top of native group policy to implement those? So firstly, group policy itself is a systems administration system that was bundled together with Active Directory completely from its inception with Windows 2000. Back in those days, Microsoft was notorious for taking an off-the-shelf kind of standard like LDAP and enhancing it in certain ways that were kind of proprietary to Microsoft's implementation. Famously, they did this a lot with Exchange, and they did this with LDAP as well, with Active Directory, by including things like Kerberos authentication, as well as a systems management um, platform called Group Policy. And Group Policy is ultimately this. If you take a look at if we take a look at a group policy management console as it is bundled with Active Directory, we can see that what we have are a collection of objects called group policy objects. And these objects, which we can see a full list by going to the group policy objects container, contain a set of settings that are applied to endpoints. And how they're applied to endpoints is somewhat complex. They can be either everything from as simple as, I have a computer object that's inside an OU, and that OU has a group policy linked to it, all the way to much, much more complex types of applications, such as I have a group policy that's setting settings. There is in that group policy object is set on a level, 3 levels above where my computer object actually is. And in addition to that, I have a security filter so that only members of groups actually get the filter applied. And in addition to that, I might have a WMI filter so that it only applies to certain classes or vendors of machines. All that to say is that the you know group policy is included and it's a part of every Active Directory implementation, and what and where it applies to is relatively complex. Additionally, group policy objects are extraordinarily powerful. Like if we take a look at a group policy object, down here to one that I'd use often for demos, and we take a look at the potential settings of this, we can see that in addition to simple things like, oh, I might want to say change the desktop wallpaper, or I want to maybe push some specific browser settings out into endpoints. So in addition to simple things like that, additionally, we can set incredibly powerful things within group policy as well. So for instance, look in Windows settings here, you can see that some of the core sort of security aspects of Windows are able to be set there. What encryption types are used, what gets audited where, all the way to things like who's a member of the local administrative groups. You can deploy scripts using group policies. And all of these things, anything that gets applied through group policy objects, are applied under the sort of the system context. That is, anything that we tell it to do is going to happen at the very highest levels of privilege. And when it comes to editing group policy, I can make a change here to this policy. I'm just looking around and I'll pick edge here. And sure, I click enable, I click OK, and then I click close. And at this point, that change is now live within Active Directory. So you can see there's just a whole like sort of cross discipline sort of set of aspects that all sort of add up to group policy being both very powerful, very ubiquitous, as well as somewhat complicated to apply and easy to make a change to, even if you're not realizing it. This means that within organizations, it's not uncommon for mistakes to happen when group policy is edited and worked on. Like, oh, I was just looking, I didn't realize that I've just made a policy that now is pushed out and is touching 10,000 endpoints and is even potentially hindering their ability to function as designed. And not only are we seeing and have seen over the last 22 years when people have been working with group policy, mistakes being made through group policy administration, but we're also seeing group policy being leveraged by attackers in an environment where they're taking advantage of the fact that you have this ability to do nearly anything against an endpoint, and attackers are leveraging that capability in order to compromise endpoints that they find. So that's the problem. That's the problem that GPOADmin is designed to solve. So the way GPOADmin solves this, it is a proxy-based governance system. And when I say proxy-based, essentially we remove the ability for users or administrators to be able to directly affect group policy objects or where they're linked. And we move that behind a service account that GPOADmin runs as that does have that ability. And then GPOADmin applies a set of much greater controls around what and where and how group policy can be changed and applied. Every time you do anything with group policy, it creates a version of that policy, so it's easy to roll back. GPOADmin has built-in abilities for approvals, where on a granular basis, you can say, all right, well, perhaps Matthew does have the ability to make this change, but in order for this change to actually reach production, some of Matthew's peers has to approve it, or Matthew's management, or perhaps a CAB board needs to also technically approve this change before it can ever reach production. And GPOADmin adds a great deal of granularity around who can do what. So rather than GPMC or native, where there's just basically a great big list of group policy objects, and you go through that list point by point and either allow people to work with it or not allow people to work with it. Instead, GPOADmin collects everything under a familiar kind of file system like what we call a version control root, which makes it much simpler to collect policies that require similar permissions together and set those permissions once at the container level and let those flow down into each policy. So this ultimately is why GPOADmin exists. It exists to provide just a layer of safety and governance around group policy administration so that it can help organizations avoid making mistakes. And it can also help organizations avoid the misuse of group policy by attackers to affect their network in a negative way. So in our upcoming videos, we're going to be delving much deeper into how GPOADmin does each of these things. And not only these core features, but also sort of the additional constellation of features that GPOADmin has, things like reporting and synchronization and protection templates. But this is ultimately what GPOADmin is all about, governance.